There is a plant growing in your neighbor's garden right now. It has been growing in human gardens for 5,000 years. It fed the courts of ancient Persia. It crossed the Sahara with Arab traders. It sailed with Portuguese merchants into the Americas. It sat at the center of Ottoman feasts and Japanese temple offerings and Indian harvest rituals long before any modern nation existed. And yet most people today do not know its name. Not its real name. Not where it came from. Not what it survived to reach them. They call it eggplant in America, aubergine in France, brinjal across South Asia and Africa, melanzana in Italy, a word that carries, hidden inside it, an older fear, mela insana, the mad apple, the fruit that was once believed to cause lunacy, fever, and moral corruption simply by being eaten. This is the plant that was banned from European tables for nearly 2 centuries. This is also the plant that never stopped growing. Welcome to Ancient Food Files. This channel exists because the most important knowledge on Earth is rarely the loudest. It is buried in soil records, in colonial archives, in the oral traditions of farmers whose names were never written down. We preserve what was designed to be forgotten. If this kind of knowledge matters to you, consider subscribing, not for the numbers, for the archive. Now, let us go back. Further than supermarkets. Further than recipes. Further than the first time someone told you what an eggplant was. We begin in what is now northeastern India and Myanmar, approximately 3,000 years before the Common Era. The plant growing wild along the forest edges there was not purple. It was small, and pale, and bitter. It carried thorns along its stem. It belonged to the nightshade family, Solanaceae, a lineage that also produced tomatoes, peppers, tobacco, and deadly belladonna, a family the natural world built to be complicated. The indigenous peoples of that region had a name for it that colonial records did not bother to preserve. What the records do show, in Sanskrit texts from approximately 300 BCE, is a cultivated version already integrated into agriculture, medicine, and daily cooking. The Charaka Samhita, one of the foundational texts of Ayurvedic medicine, references the plant, Badingana, not as a curiosity but as a staple, something already old when the text was written. The plant had been selected over generations, made larger, made less bitter, made purple. This is how domestication works when it is done slowly and carefully by people who live close to the ground. You do not engineer, you observe. You save seeds from the plant that bore more fruit. You plant those seeds the following season. You do this for 100 years, for 500 years. The plant becomes something new without ever being forced. By the time the first written records appear, the eggplant was already ancient, already transformed, already moving. The fruit itself is unusual in the plant kingdom. It is, technically, a berry, a large, water-dense, seed-filled berry wrapped in a skin that ranges from deep violet to white to striped green depending on the variety. Inside, the flesh is pale and spongy, a structure that has frustrated Western cooks for centuries and delighted Eastern ones for millennia. That spongy interior is not a flaw. It is an engineering decision made by evolution. The flesh of Solanum melongena is built to absorb fat, smoke, acid, heat. It transforms under cooking in ways that most vegetables do not. Roasted over open flame, it collapses into something smoky and silken. Salted and pressed, it releases bitterness and softens completely. Simmered in oil, it drinks the liquid and becomes something almost animal in its richness. This quality made it remarkable to every culinary tradition that encountered it. It could be made to taste like almost anything. It could replace almost anything. It required no refrigeration. It grew through heat that would kill most crops. It produced fruit season after season without demanding the constant attention of wheat or rice. It was, in the language of survival, nearly perfect. And it was not fragile. The plant tolerates drought. It tolerates poor soil. It regenerates after cutting. It can be grown in containers, in rooftops, in narrow strips of earth between walls. It does not require large landholdings or mechanical harvesting or complex infrastructure. This is the quality that would, eventually, make it inconvenient. The movement of the eggplant westward is a record of the ancient world's most important trade routes. Arab scholars and merchants carried it across Persia and into the Levant sometime around the 4th century CE. By the 9th and 10th centuries, Arabic agricultural texts, most notably Ibn al-Alam's Kitab al-Fila, the Book of Agriculture, described in detail the cultivation, varieties, and medicinal applications of what was called albadinjan. The Moors brought it into Spain by the 8th century. It traveled with them into Sicily and across North Africa. The Ottoman Empire cultivated it obsessively. Historians have documented over 40 distinct eggplant dishes in Ottoman court cuisine by the 16th century. The word imam bayildi, the imam fainted, carries in it the story of a religious leader reportedly overwhelmed by the richness of a dish made from this single fruit. In 1492, a Spanish physician named Petrus de Crescentius warned that the eggplant produced melancholy and illness. His warnings were not exceptional. They were the consensus. European physicians of the 15th and 16th centuries looked at this fruit arriving from Arab lands, from Muslim civilization, and categorized it as dangerous not only medically but culturally. The word melanzana carried its suspicion openly. Mad apple, bad egg, the fruit of unreason. It was not science. It was politics wearing the costume of medicine. For nearly 2 centuries, the eggplant sat on European windowsills as an ornamental, pretty, decorative, forbidden. While it fed millions across Asia, the Middle East, and Africa, while it was ground into pastes and grilled over coals and stewed with lamb and preserved in oil, Europe kept it at arm's length and called it dangerous. The erasure did not come from one place. It never does. When the industrial food systems of the 19th and 20th centuries began to restructure global agriculture, they required specific qualities in the crops they promoted: uniformity, long shelf life, high yield per acre, compatibility with mechanical harvesting, ability to withstand weeks of transport without spoiling. The eggplant failed most of these requirements. It bruises easily, its skin darkens under pressure, it spoils within days without refrigeration. It comes in hundreds of varieties: long, round, white, striped, thumb-sized, enormous, none of which could be standardized into a single profitable commodity. More critically, it was unownable in the way that industrial agriculture required. You could save eggplant seeds at the end of a season and replant them next year. You did not need to purchase them again. You did not need the intermediary. A crop you cannot sell twice has no future in a system built on repetitive dependency. And so the thousands of regional varieties developed over 5 millennia began to disappear. Not dramatically, not in a single moment of destruction. They faded quietly, as seeds do when they are no longer planted, when the farmer who kept them dies and the knowledge dies with them, when the land is converted and the variety that grew there has no other home. This is how extinction works for plants, not with fire, with forgetting. Across parts of West Africa and the African diaspora in the Americas, the eggplant, carried on slave ships as cheap sustenance, grown in the kitchen gardens of enslaved people because it required little and gave much, became associated over generations with the conditions of survival under brutal constraint. Foods eaten in suffering do not always survive in the memory as nourishment. Sometimes they survive as wounds. The rejection of these foods by subsequent generations is not irrational. It is grief wearing the shape of a preference. But something is lost when the knowledge detaches from the plant. When the seed is kept but the story is buried. When a child grows up knowing only that their grandparents ate a certain food and never knowing why, never knowing what that plant carried them through, never knowing what intelligence the growing of it represented. The forgetting is not accidental. It is what happens when survival becomes something to move away from rather than something to understand. The world that is coming will require what the eggplant already knows. Global surface temperatures are rising in patterns that punish water-intensive monocultures. Aquifer depletion in the agricultural regions of South Asia, the American Midwest, and Northern Africa is accelerating at rates that current crop systems cannot sustain. Soil degradation from synthetic input dependency has reduced the productive capacity of an estimated 33% of the world's arable land. The crops that industrial agriculture built its dominance upon are fragile in ways that are only now becoming visible. They require precise inputs, stable climates, constant management. Remove one condition and the yield collapses. The eggplant does not require precision. It was built for chaos. It grows in the heat that other crops retreat from. Its root system tolerates the kinds of degraded, low-moisture soil that are becoming increasingly common. Its hundreds of surviving regional varieties carry within them genetic adaptations to specific climates, specific pests, specific conditions, a library of resilience that industrial monoculture has been quietly closing for decades. The question is not whether the eggplant is useful. It has always been useful. The question is whether the knowledge of its usefulness will survive long enough to be needed. There is a passage in the agricultural writings of the Islamic Golden Age that describes the ideal gardener as someone who listens to the plant before they speak to it. This is not metaphor. It describes a practice of observation, of watching where a plant grows strongest, what it reaches toward, what it avoids, before imposing any system of cultivation upon it. The eggplant has been trying to tell us something for 5,000 years. It has been telling us in the soil of northeastern India, in the terraced gardens of the Ottoman Empire, in the rooftop plots of Mumbai and the back plots of Palermo and the market stalls of Addis Ababa and the community gardens of Detroit. It has been telling us that it does not need ideal conditions. It needs only to be planted. The knowledge was never lost. It was only waiting for someone to stop dismissing what they did not own. Nature does not require permission to persist, it requires only time, and the eggplant has always understood time better than the systems that tried to replace it. If this archive matters to you, if preserving the knowledge of what the earth already knows feels urgent, subscribe to Ancient Food Files. The next record is already waiting.